My name is Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and today I'm going to show you 6 musicians who influenced the legendary Led Zeppelin producer and guitarist Jimmy Page. But first, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your comment. Well, in an interview with Barbara Bogaev back in 2017, Jimmy Page talked about his influences, and he mentioned 6 artists. And then we selected what he said about those artists over the years to explain more why they were an influence to him. And let's start. The first one that he mentioned was, as expected, Elvis Presley, who practically influenced all those rock and roll artists from the 60s that first started their careers in the 60s, because Elvis was the king of the 50s rock and roll for sure. And in an interview, actually in his Instagram, on his Instagram profile a few years ago, Jimmy Page recalled that he had the chance to play in Tupelo, Mississippi, which was back in 1998, which was where Elvis was born in 1935. And this is what Jimmy Page said about that experience. In 1998, I played at Tupelo, where Elvis was born and raised, when there were no local attractions apart from the cotton fields or getting to Memphis. When Elvis grew up, it must have been pretty bleak, but the white and black picked the cotton side by side, and the local indigenous music provided the soundtrack to this tough environment. So it took the visionary genius of Elvis to blend those musical sources and change the world. And that's what Jimmy said about Elvis. And the cool thing is that Led Zeppelin had the chance to meet Elvis when he was already in the 70s, obviously. But they had the chance to meet Elvis, and I mean, what an experience. Led Zeppelin meeting Elvis Presley. And they were total fanboys, obviously. And the next one that he mentioned, and these are all old acts because obviously he was mostly influenced by artists from the 50s and from those eras of music. And the second one that he mentioned, it was Johnny Bernette and the Rock and Roll Trio. Another American musician, Johnny Bernette, was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1934, 1 year before Elvis. And he was a rockabilly pioneer. And some of his most famous songs are Rock Billy Boogie and Honey Hush. In an interview with Rolling Stone in 2020, Jimmy Page explained a little better the influence of Johnny Bernette, and this is what he said. You were fueled to do the best you could, and it's quite right. I mean, one of those records that stopped you in your tracks was Johnny Bernette and the Rock and Roll Trio, released in 1956. The musical glue of their record is just absolutely phenomenal. Also, the guitar playing was so abstract to anything else that I ever heard. So this is what Jimmy said about Johnny Bernette and the Rock and Roll Trio, the second one that he mentioned it. And we move to the third one. The third one is Vincent, famous for the hit Be-Bop-A-Lula, She's My Baby. You probably know that song. And also in an interview with Rolling Stone, he explained a little bit more of his love for Gene Vincent. And he even mentioned his friend Jeff Beck, who was a really great friend. And this is what he said. The very first time I met Jeff, I said, "What's your version of Little Walter's My Babe?" to see how he played it. And I said, "Yeah, well, I've been doing it like this." He just had an instant rapport with me. He had a homemade guitar at the time, and I'm sure he'd be very proud to say that. We were just 2 kids. We'd heard rock and roll. We'd heard these guitars, and there was no turning back. Even at that age, in our teens, that's it. We're committed. As each release came with the Gene Vincent stuff, it was really challenging to even attempt to play it. But once you had a solid body guitar as opposed to a cello body, it became more double. Nevertheless, you were fueled to do the best you could, and it's quite right. So that's what he said about Gene Vincent, about the influence he had not only in his career but on Jeff Beck's career. And Gene tragically died at the age of 36 back in 1971 from a combination of a ruptured ulcer, internal hemorrhage, and heart failure while visiting his father in California. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998 by the Creedence Clearwater Revival vocalist and guitarist John Fogerty. The next one that he mentioned is a blues man, one of the most important blues musicians of all time, Mr. Muddy Waters. And you can hear on in Led Zeppelin's music all the influence of the blues music and a lot of influence from Muddy Waters. And he sadly passed away at the age of 70 in 1983. So he lived long enough to see the beginning and the end of Led Zeppelin, right? And some of his most famous songs are Manish Boy, I'm Your Hoochie Coochie Man, Rolling Stone, Got My Mojo Working. And in an interview with Reuters, Jimmy Page named Muddy Waters as an influence, and he talked about the blues, saying, as far as the blues, it just captured them hearing Chicago blues. When the Stones first started, they were doing really good interpretations of Muddy Waters songs and all that jazz catalog. They weren't the only ones, of course. Down in the south of London, that's what's going on. So that's what he said about Muddy Waters' influence. And the next one that he mentioned was Elmer James, another American artist, another blues artist. And Elmer James was born in Holmes County, in Richland, Holmes County, Mississippi, back in 1918. He was a blues singer and a guitarist, and he was known as King of the Slide Guitar. He was also praised for his use of loud amplification, his stirring voice, and some of his most famous songs are The Sky's Crying, Dust My Broom, Shake Your Money Maker. And in an interview with Rolling Stone in 2012, Jimmy Page talked about it. And he said that he was once struggling to learn Elmer James songs, and he certainly learned the secret watching the Rolling Stones guitarist Brian Jones playing. I didn't know Mick and Keith as well as I knew Jeff, but I'd seen Brian at the Ealing Jazz Club. I saw him playing bottleneck guitar. So I was struggling with the Elmer James stuff. Suddenly, it clicked. It was in the tuning. He was doing it. So he understood how Elmer James played when he watched the late legendary Rolling Stones co-founder Brian Jones playing. And the final one that he mentioned as an influence, and it's a guy that Led Zeppelin stole or borrowed a lot from it, who was the Robert Johnson, the godfather of blues, or call him what you want, one of the most important musicians of all time. And it inspired a lot. But for example, Traveling Riverside Blues, it's a song filled with Robert Johnson influences, even lyrics. And during the partnership that Robert Plant and Jimmy Page had during the 90s, the Page-Plant duo, they even used to cover Crossroads Live, which is a song written by Robert Johnson. And there's a lot of mystique around the Robert Johnson persona. There's the legend that he sold his soul to the devil so he could learn how to play guitar and be a famous singer. And it all contributed for this legend, this tale of blues. And it's certainly probably the artist in this list that you can hear more in Led Zeppelin, in many songs Led Zeppelin did. And that's it. I hope you liked the video. If you want to read more, go to the description and read the article we wrote about this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Thank you for watching, and I see you later.